You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is September 1st, 2024, and this is episode 293 of Lighthearted. My co-host today is Michelle Jewel Shaw, chairperson of Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Jeremy, and hello to all of our listeners out there.
In a few minutes, we'll listen to a conversation about the planned restoration of Cedar Island Lighthouse on Long Island, New York. So how's it going, Michelle? Of course, our regular listeners will remember that you are a middle school teacher. We're actually recording this on August 27th. Has the school year started yet?
It has, actually. The teachers, we reported back yesterday. Today was 6th grade, so we do a staggered start. 6th grade was today, 7th grade's tomorrow. 8th grade, which is what grade I teach, they'll be there on Thursday, and then Friday all of the students will be there. So it's definitely very, very busy right now. So
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out to co-host this episode right now.
No
when
problem.
You say the opening is staggered, I hope you're not staggering too much from all this all this activity.
Yeah.
Anyway, good luck with that. Of course, this is Labor Day weekend, so you get an extra day off at least on
Yeah,
Monday.
We have a 3-day weekend this weekend.
Yeah, to recuperate from the start of classes.
Yes.
So good luck with everything.
Thank you.
And of course, you and I are also busy with Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses, our local group here on the New Hampshire seacoast. As a matter of fact, as we speak, we are about to have a Zoom meeting tonight about what's happening with the planned restoration of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse after all the storm damage there last January. We are hoping to at least get things stabilized before winter.
Yes, Jeremy. Hopefully we can get all of that stabilization done before winter, so that more damage isn't impacting the lighthouse. And that would just be terrible if, that happens. So fingers crossed we can get things done pretty soon.
Definitely. Yeah. We'll get something done before winter, but full restoration looks like I'll probably have to wait till next year. But
yeah.
Also, I want to remind everyone that Saturday from 1 to 4, that's next Saturday from the time people will be hearing this, next Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, that's September 7th, we're having a live virtual event celebrating the 40th anniversary of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. The event is free to attend, but you need to register in advance. The details are at uslhs.org under events. I will be hosting the event along with Jeff Gales, Executive Director of the USLHS. We'll have lots of fun and surprises, plus we will be showing the finalists in our dance contest. We're calling it a dance-off, and the audience will get to vote for the winners. And we'll be looking back at 5 years of this podcast. I hope lots of our listeners will be attending. So let's get to today's interview. Please help me out, Michelle.
Sure, Jeremy. Three-acre Cedar Island is located on the South Fork of Long Island, New York. It's on the approach to Sag Harbor, a busy whaling port in the first half of the 19th century. A wooden lighthouse was established on Cedar Island in 1839, and it was replaced in 1868 by the granite lighthouse and keeper's dwelling that still stands today.
The Great Hurricane of September 1938 created a sandbar that connected Cedar Island to the mainland, and it remains attached today. The lighthouse was discontinued in 1934 and was in private ownership until 1967, when it was purchased by Suffolk County and incorporated into a park.
In 1974, the interior of the building was gutted by a fire. In 2002, the Friends of Cedar Island Lighthouse began working with Suffolk County Parks to restore the lighthouse. In 2013, the badly rusted lantern was lifted off the lighthouse to be restored. The building is being made structurally sound so the lantern can be reinstalled.
So we have two guests today. Joe Livolsi is a board member of the Friends of Cedar Island Lighthouse, and Michael Leahy is the chairman of the organization. Let's listen to our conversation now. I am speaking this afternoon with two guests who are connected to the Friends of Cedar Island Lighthouse. Michael Leahy is the chairman of the organization, and Joe Livolsi, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Please correct me if I'm not. Joe Livolsi is a board member of the Friends of Cedar Island Lighthouse. So thank you both very much for being with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Nice to be here.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And looking forward to talking about this. So to start out, before we get into the lighthouse and the restoration that's been going on for some time, I'm wondering how each of you got involved with the restoration of the lighthouse.
It was back around 2009. I've been passing this lighthouse for, over 30 years, being a young, from the time I was young, I was out boating out there. I did some painting and I painted it a few times. And I found out I was interested in getting what was going on in restoration. And I did find out there was an organization that had been working on the restoration. And this was before 2009. They had put this on the National Register of Historic built the places and had restored the oil house. So then somehow I got involved, and that's we can go into that. That's when we started really getting more involved in trying to get the county involved and raise some money.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how that got going.
Sure. Okay. And just to clarify, that was Mike talking just now. And Joe, you want to answer
I
the
got
same
I
question?
got I got involved in this. And Mike and I had done a project several years ago where his house was part of a commercial that I had lit. It was for a reverse mortgage
Ah.
company with Robert Wagner, actually. and
Oh,
and
really? Oh,
and so
cool.
Mike's house was the backdrop and the pool area and inside and stuff. And so we became fairly friendly during that time. And then a former classmate of his had gotten in touch with me through another gentleman to help him shoot a little spot for the lighthouse. Would I donate my time and my cameras and lighting and blah blah blah, and would I do this? And I said yes. And the guy wasn't Rich Altamonte, who was a classmate of Mike. So we went out and we shot this thing, and we looked at each other and I was like, I know you, and we knew each other from the commercial. And basically, I wound up shooting some videos for the lighthouse, and one thing led to another. And I was out there a few times working with Mike and working with the county a little bit during some historical work, and doing some shoots for the lighthouse. And then he asked me to kind of join the group, and I said yeah. And so the rest is kind of history at this point. So.
Well, I know from experience, you got to watch out. These lighthouses will grab hold of you and not let go. But
Yeah, it's funny. The lighthouse is not close to me. I live closer to the Eaton's Neck Lighthouse than I do
mhm.
the Cedar Island Lighthouse. But I've always loved lighthouses, so this is kind of a labor of love, I guess you could say.
Oh, sure. And by the way, last May of last year, I led a U.S. Lighthouse Society group tour with about 30 people on Long Island
Okay.
for a week. And we managed to get permission to climb the Eaton's Neck Lighthouse of the
Oh,
Coast Guard
cool. You
Auxiliary,
could have
which was
called
really.
me. Say,
Oh, okay. Do you know Jeff Wright at the Coast
I
Guard
don't
Station?
really know.
Or
It's kind of the Coast Guard thing, so I
yeah,
don't really know. I don't really know anybody over there. So
yeah. Well, that was great. But we
yeah.
didn't get to Cedar Island. Maybe by the time we do another Long Island tour, the lighthouse will be restored and we can take a
Well,
tour there.
from your
We'll
lips to
see.
God's ears. So
Okay.
We're now friends of the Cedar Island Lighthouse, and there's a reason for that. We started out as the Long Island chapter of the United States Lighthouse Society. I was trying to get a grant from New York State, and any organization that had more than $500,000 of income had to have a certified public accountant, and Lighthouse Society didn't have it. So on the spur of the moment, I created the Friends of the Cedar Island Lighthouse. That's how we became the Friends.
Yeah, no, I knew there was a connection to the Long Island chapter of USLHS in the beginning, which is neat to know that the society was involved in the early days.
Exactly.
So, Mike, you probably want to take this. Why was the lighthouse needed on Cedar Island in the first place?
Well, Sag Harbor was a whaling town back in the early 1800s, and it's a very difficult harbor to get into if you don't know your way around. So there was a lot of ships at that time coming in and out, and many of them got grounded and hit rocks. And so they put a lighthouse up in 1839, and it was a wooden lighthouse that was up there until 1868. And they took the lantern from the original lighthouse and put it into the current lighthouse. The light, excuse me, the light. They put the light into the lantern, and that light disappeared when the lighthouse
Yeah.
was decommissioned.
This is the Fresnel lens we're talking about.
Yes, the Fresnel lens, exactly.
Not the only one that disappeared in that time period. Do we know where the granite came from to build the lighthouse?
Joe, we talked about this.
We were talking about that, Jeremy, a little bit before. The only thing that we know at this point right now, or what's been said to us in some of the documents, it was brought in from New England. Where in New England it came from, I don't personally know. I don't know that anybody knows that at this point. There may be somebody, one of the other members may know that, but I don't think so. But all we know is that it came from New England.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
would
my,
imagine it
my,
came from New Hampshire, maybe, who knows?
Well,
the
it's the
con
Granite State. I'm
It is
here
the
in the
Granite
Granite
That's
State.
State,
right.
so.
I think Vermont is probably the right place.
Could be,
Okay.
but there's granite quarries all over New England.
Yeah.
Cape Ann, Rockport, named for the
Yeah.
granite. That was a big center for it too. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of them.
And I think the contractor who built the lighthouse was from Massachusetts, I believe.
Let's talk a little bit about the human history. I'm curious, are there any interesting stories about keepers and families who lived there over the years?
I understand. I don't have a lot of information on the keepers. I had a list of all the keepers or most of the keepers, but I don't know a lot about them. I do know that one of the keepers lost his leg in the Civil War. There were stories that his wooden leg was up in the attic of the lighthouse after he left. And there's a picture of him that we have standing in the lighthouse in 1910. And we believe it's the man with the wooden leg.
Oh, wow.
We know the last keeper of the lighthouse, Joe, trying to remember his name.
Was that Follett?
Alan,
William
Alan,
Follett? Was that the last
great
guy?
grandfather. He left in 1934. We do have pictures of various family people out there, and in the days when it was a working lighthouse. Well, that was the last keeper.
Yeah.
We do have some pictures of him.
Yeah. According to the wooden leg, what I read was that he had a bunch of them that he was taking over a lot of wherever he could find them. He was a Civil War vet, from what I gather, and he had found as many wooden legs as he could, and he had stored them in the lighthouse. And they found some of them. They were burned up in the '74 fire.
Wow.
So there were some that were remnants, but he had stored a lot of whatever he could find locally.
So he collected wooden legs like I
Well,
collect
'cause he had
I collect baseball caps. They're all over my
Yeah,
wall.
yeah.
There you go.
So I guess he needed him. So
Yeah, right. He's not the only one-legged lighthouse keeper I know of. There are at least a couple in Maine. I know there was one at Ram Island in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, for many years. So unusual. And he, I believe, was also a Civil War veteran who lost his leg in the war. So I think they were kind of rewarded for their service by giving lighthouse keeper positions. And of course, they couldn't put them in really tall lighthouses, like Cape Hatteras or something. You couldn't have a 200-foot tall lighthouse. So, to jump ahead a little bit, why was the light deactivated in 1934?
Well, in 1934, you realize that was right after the Depression, and the government was trying to save on, trying to cut back. And at that point, I believe, that's when the automatic lights became available. So if you look around, I think we've seen a lot of lighthouses got deactivated around that same time.
That's absolutely true. Now, when Cedar Island was discontinued, was an automatic light on like a skeletal tower or something put up nearby? Is that what happened?
Yes, and it remains there today.
It's still there. Yeah,
still in use today.
Yes.
Okay.
That tower has been replaced several times, but it's still there.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't really sure about that. And just a few years later, what happened at Cedar Island in the hurricane of 1938?
Cedar Island, it was on an island. I think it was about 3 acres. The hurricane of 38 blew up so much sand that it reattached it to the point, the Cedar Point. So now it's often known as Cedar Point Lighthouse, where traditionally it's Cedar Island Lighthouse. And we always say that nature gave it another chance.
Right.
It brought it back to the mainland.
Let's talk about what happened between the hurricane of 38 and then there was a really important fire in 1974. Anything in between those two dates?
Well, in 1938, I believe, or 39, it was acquired by a man named Phelan Beale, who was a wealthy New York guy, and he acquired the lighthouse in the whole area there for a hunting lodge. And so I don't think he used the lighthouse, but it was there. And then he sold it to a woman called Mrs. Winthrop Bailey, and she used the lighthouse as a summer cottage, and she used it for a number of years. And a lot of people in Sag Harbor still remember her because they would ferry her back and forth, because at one time there was a dock there. And she was actually very friendly with Lion Gardner. And we have some pictures of her with Lion Gardner. So there was a lot of history there. And then Suffolk County acquired it. And it was right after Suffolk County acquired it in 1974. There are stories about how it happened. There's a lot of different stories. They were doing some repairs and welding. Back in those days, when they built this, there was straw. They placed straw between the outer and the inner walls, and the straw caught fire. And it was totally gutted. The four walls remained, but the roof was gone.
There is another thought. Obviously, that there was a lot of vandalism, and kids had gotten into the lighthouse to party and whatever they were doing. And there was also
Sure.
a school of thought that that's kind of how that cigarette or something along those lines. And so they thought that might have been it, but there's no real final take on.
Nobody knows.
Nobody really knows what caused it.
But what the county did was they put a new roof on it.
Yeah.
They blocked up all the windows and put a scaffold on the inside to stabilize the building. That sort of remains today. Until about a year ago, now they've just replaced some of the interior, fixed up the roof a little bit, but it's not all that different than it was in after the fire.
As you've talked about a bit, the Long Island chapter of the U.S. Lighthouse Society kind of morphed into, at least part of it, morphed into the Friends of Cedar Island Lighthouse. So again, Mike, sounds like you were there at the start of Friends of Cedar Island Lighthouse. Is that correct?
Fairly right after it got started,
Okay.
working on the oil house. And I think that happened around 2003 through 2004 or 5. I got involved a couple of years after that.
Okay, but it was various concerned citizens who got the effort
Yes,
really
it was just
rolling.
local people who love lighthouses.
And in the years since then, you mentioned the restoration of the oil house. What else has been accomplished there?
In 2013, we had an offer from a very generous company to send out a barge and a crane, and we quickly got permission from the county to lift the lantern off the lighthouse. We brought the lantern on the barge back to Sag Harbor. We took it to the Sag Harbor Yacht Yard. During the course of that summer, we had it sandblasted. We had put a couple of coats. We put a coat of zinc on it and 2 coats of polyurethane. And it was done by a company that does the bridges in New York City. So they kind of knew what they were doing. So we're thinking that this lantern will be now safe for another 50 years. It was in very bad condition. We went down to a foundry down in Virginia, and they put a new ball and chimney on it. There was a door missing. We had a company in Chicago make a new door for us. We got all that done. And the other thing that we did was probably more valuable than anything is we lobbied Suffolk County to appropriate some capital for this. They have probably, right now they have $4 million, which they think will continue the work on the exterior only. They've probably already spent, Joe, what do we think? Maybe $1 million?
Yeah, at least $1 million. The last go round 2 years ago, they had spent $175,000. So there's an appropriation right now that Bridget Fleming, who was the assemblywoman from Sag Harbor, got $4 million. So that's the next step. But according to what we know, they're saying that just the exterior alone is supposed to be $8 million. So 4 million plus the other million, that's where we're at right now. So about 5 million plus has been appropriated for it.
What they've accomplished so far is the roof had a lot of holes in it. They sort of stabilized the roof. There was a scaffold inside the lighthouse to stabilize the walls. They replaced that. So they've got the building stabilized. It's not getting water inside. It's doing okay. And now they're going to do a lot of concrete work. After they finish the concrete work, we can probably then put back the lantern back on top of it, but they won't let us do that yet.
The roof that's on there right now is only a temporary roof to keep the elements out, as it were, because they did a pretty good job with putting the new scaffolding up. I was in there and did a tour. I did some still work in there, so that's kind of on our website as far as what they've done in there. They've done a nice job shoring it up, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And there's, it's tough to get out there to do the work, but there's also issues with piping plovers and that kind of stuff. So you can only work on the lighthouse for a certain amount of time during the year. It's real tough to get out there and do anything on the point in the winter time. So it's taken a little bit longer than or a lot longer than we'd like, or the county would probably like at this point. So
Sure, I understand. If people ask you, and I'm sure people do ask you, how do I get out there? How do I go see the lighthouse? What do you tell them? Is it even possible?
oh yeah. As a matter of fact, we just got notification from a group that wanted to have a birthday party out there, in the middle of August, and so you have to go through the Parks Department to get permission, not really through us, but to get out there, you go to Cedar Point Park. It's on the South Fork of Long Island, and you have to drive towards Sag Harbor, or north to the harbor itself. So it's a bit of a drive to get down and around. But once you get there and you park, it's about a mile walk, and it's a lot of people do it. It's a nice little hike, and if it's a nice day, it's a beautiful spot just to get out there and kind of see what's going on. A lot of people go out there and camp, and we've had people give us pictures of their picnics and whatnot, and hanging shells on trees and that kind of stuff. And it's a really wonderful, wonderful spot. So we're hoping that it starts to get fixed sooner than later, but it's still a really nice spot to go out and spend a day, if you really want to do it.
It's a 1 mile walk out there and 2 miles back.
Right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've experienced places
Exactly.
like that. Yeah,
Exactly. But it's a better part of a day to really get out there
And a lot of people go out there, and every time I often go when I fish right near there, and there's always people out there fishing.
So
Yeah.
fishing around there is really good.
Right at the end, yes, very good spot.
Yeah.
Because a lot of water runs through there.
So, Mike, you mentioned more work happening, I guess, soon. Is there going to be more work? Do you know this season, or will that be next season?
Well, I think it's going to be next season. And talking to the county's architect, as Joe was saying, you can only work from mid-August through maybe the end of November, maybe the end of December, and after that, it's very tough to work out there. So you have a pretty short season, and by the time the county had run up some plans for the work they wanted to do this year, it was too late to get started. So I don't think we're going to see anything else, much of anything else this year. So it's probably going to be 2025 when the work starts again.
Right. And is there any projected completion date?
I wish I could say there was.
Yeah, not that we're aware. We'd like it to be done, but not that we're aware. I think it's based upon what the architect can get done. And like Mike had just said, and like we talked earlier, it's tough to get out there, and you don't have a big time frame to do anything, and so it's taking a lot longer than everybody would like to at this point. But it's getting there. It's getting.
And the architect is a very fine architect. And he's the architect for the Lighthouse Museum on Staten Island.
Right.
He's very involved.
You talked a little bit about this before. Obviously, the interior needs to be completely redone. But what are the other most pressing issues with it? Are there major structural issues with the building?
I believe that where we are right now, the architect feels that the walls are not quite plumb, and he wants to spend some time taking down some of the block and putting it back.
Yeah.
But I think it's sat there 150 years so far. So and the base, no one has ever said anything badly about the base. So the base is in good shape. Around 1900, the government put a lot of riprap around the area because that island kept eroding.
Mm-hmm.
It was an island that kept eroding, and they put all this riprap. And so right now there's more sand around the lighthouse than there was in 1934.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of erosion, we're finding now there's accretion. Nature has given us a second chance.
Okay. Well, that kind of answers a question I was thinking of asking you, which is it endangered at all by rising sea levels and the increasingly bad storms we seem to be getting? It sounds like it's fairly safe for the time being.
The only concern is vandalism.
So, Mike, you said sounds like there's a good amount of funding in place already. Are more funds needed? Is there fundraising going on? What's happening with that?
Well, I think there'll be funds needed for the interior of the lighthouse, and there's been a discussion as to what use the lighthouse will be after it is restored. And at one point, we were hoping that we would be able to use it as a bed and breakfast. It could be used as a bed and breakfast. Yeah. Right now, the county is just talking about doing it as a museum, and if you do it as a museum, fundraising I think will be a lot harder. But we're working on that. But we need a significant amount to do the interior. We're probably talking another in my view, several $1 million. So
Yeah, yeah,
we still got a hill to climb.
yeah. Seems to me it could be both a museum and a B&B.
Oh, definitely. You know, our model is the lighthouse up in right up near Albany.
Saugerties Lighthouse.
Saugerties, yeah.
Saugerties, right. And
This is the sister lighthouse. It's
the same
Yeah.
design, basically.
And that one was almost rebuilt, reconstructed. It was in such bad shape. Yeah.
Very nice
But-
people too. Very,
But
very
the organization they own the property, they own the building.
Yeah.
And so they can they have control of it, whereas it's the county sort of runs the show here.
Right. Yeah, Saugerties is beautiful. I've been there, and I interviewed Patrick Landaway, I believe is his name.
Yes,
Is he still
yeah,
there?
lighthouse keeper.
Yeah.
He's been there a long time.
Yeah. It was really nice when I interviewed him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I absolutely. I mean, another case along those lines would be Rose Island Lighthouse in Newport, Rhode Island. The first floor is a museum. The upstairs is an apartment for rent. There's no reason it can't be both. And if you have overnight stays, obviously it's a way of generating funds for the continued upkeep of the place.
Correct.
These places have to generate funds if they're going to be sustained in the long term. I probably don't need to tell you that. Yeah.
Well, that was the original thought, was for it to be a bed and breakfast. But so there's still some discussions, I guess, going on as to what it's totally going to be when it is restored. It's been a challenge. The county's been great as far as getting a specific amount of dollars for the restoration for the exterior, but what's going to happen beyond that? We're still low on funds for that. You know what I mean? So if they're saying it's $8 million just to do the exterior, we have 5. We still need another 3. And then what's going to happen on the interior? So we're trying to get donations, and our donations are dribs and drabs of like $25 or $50. Some people are giving 200. So we just revamped the website, and we're trying to get people to kind of know what we're doing. And so it's been a little bit of a tough sledding at this point. We're optimistic that we can try to get some more funding.
Yeah.
We were trying to get grants, but that's been few and far between. And Mike knows better about the grants than I do, but that would be great if we could get some grant money. So it is the fundraising part of it has been a little bit of a challenge.
Absolutely. Is there a mechanism on the website that people can donate?
Yeah, if you go to our website, there's a button right at the top. As soon as you click on the website and you can donate, it can go PayPal, credit cards. It's however.
What is the website? What's the website address?
It's www.cedarislandlighthouse.org.
Jeremy, I came up with an idea.
Okay.
Somebody did. Jimmy Buffett lived in Sag Harbor. He died last year, and he wanted to die in Sag Harbor. I have proposed to Suffolk County that the lighthouse become the Jimmy Buffett Lighthouse. And one of the reasons I think it would be an honor to him, but also I think fundraising would be tremendously improved if we had a lot of.
I love that idea. It could be. Are you thinking of making it partly a Jimmy Buffett museum kind of thing, or?
We haven't gotten that far.
Yeah.
The county they have the capability of doing that, and I'm actively working with the Commissioner of Parks to see if we can make that happen.
Yeah.
Even if somehow his name got associated with it, we'd have a lot of parrot heads out there, and we could have concerts. There's a lot of things could happen.
I really, really love that idea. I like that you're thinking outside the box on that. And it's interesting. I just a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed the director of the lighthouse down in Key West, Florida, which of course Jimmy Buffett had a lot of connection to as well. People think of him with Key West a lot, but I think his later years, he didn't spend much time in Key West.
He wrote a book about going down into the Caribbean and restoring a lighthouse.
Yes, Salty Piece of Land, it was called.
Exactly. I read that book.
And me too. Yeah, well, I just really love that idea. So stay on that.
We do too. I don't know if anybody else loves
every 10 years we get a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good. Some people go a lifetime without any good ideas. So I think that's a pretty good record. So I have 2 final questions for you guys, and these, of course, are for bonus points. Okay.
Uh-oh.
I hope you're prepared, and hope you have your thinking caps on.
Okay.
So the first of the last 2 questions, and again, you can fight amongst yourselves as to who goes first. But question is, why is it important that the lighthouse be saved and restored?
Go ahead, Joe.
For me, I mean, it's such a wonderful structure. Listen, I love lighthouses. And Long Island has, what did we have? Originally 22 lighthouses, Mike, something along those lines.
22, yeah.
And I think there's 18 still around. So,
Hmm.
one of the things about it, if this thing it had in 74, if it had just fallen in on itself, who's to remember it? You know what I mean? And so the fact that it's still there and it's a wonderful historical structure, I think is important to Long Islanders. Listen, I don't live anywhere near this thing, and it's just a beautiful building. So for us, I think restoring it and having people come out there and see what it's really all about is pretty important to the history of the area, the whaling villages, and all the other stuff that is Long Island. And so once these things are gone, once they're torn down, what are you going to put? Have the beacon out there, and so what? It's just a beach. But I think for me, I think it's just getting when I go out there, it's just a wonderful place to be. It's kind of spiritual, really, if you think about it.
Well said. Mike, anything to add to that?
Well, Sag Harbor is such a historic whaling town. And even though this lighthouse is technically in East Hampton, it's really part of Sag Harbor. And I've been boating out there for almost all my life. And when you come through Gardiner's Bay, excuse me, and you pass the lighthouse, then you're in Sag Harbor. And it's a beacon that's been there and should be forever. There's no reason why it shouldn't be restored and be part of our history for our children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren. And I think we all feel that way.
Yeah. Well, I can see that. So, final question for extra bonus points, okay, is what personally have you enjoyed most about your work to restore Cedar Island Lighthouse?
I personally, I wish I could do more. I really honestly do. I love the building, and just the camaraderie with all of us trying to help this get restored has been a wonderful experience. I really have enjoyed my relationship with Mike and Vince and a lot of the other guys that sit on the board. That's been a wonderful thing for me. It's given me something to do. I'm recently retired, so I wish I could give more to it, and I'm hopefully that I can. I don't want to be long-winded about it, but it's just an extraordinary place, as are all the lighthouses.
Mm-hmm. Congrats on your retirement, by
Thank
the
you.
way.
Thank you.
And he's a new grandfather.
And I'm a new
Oh,
grandfather.
wow.
Yeah, a week. Yeah, I have a
Oh,
grandson.
wow.
Yeah.
Big congratulations on
Thank you
that.
so much.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's
And,
great.
and I would second what Joe says about the enjoyment of working with the people and the camaraderie. But in addition to that, I really enjoy taking old structures and bringing them back to life. I've restored a number of historic properties that were not on the water, whether they be homes or 100-year-old buildings. To me, it just attracts me. It's something that needs to be done, and somebody has to do it. And sometimes we're successful and it takes a long time, but maybe I'm hoping that one day I'll see the results of all this work.
Good for you. It's you're doing great work. It's important historical preservation. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that, but as some wise person once said, if we're going to move forward, understand where we're going, we have to know where we came from as well. So preserving this history is so important.
Yeah.
So Joe Livolsi and Mike Leahy, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I want to wish you sincerely all the best moving forward with this place, and I want to encourage you to make it the Jimmy Buffett Lighthouse. That's one of the best ideas I've heard in a while. So Mike and Joe, thanks again. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
You're very welcome.
To learn more, go to cedarislandlighthouse.org. The website includes restoration news, history, and a photo and video gallery.
It was a real pleasure speaking with Mike and Joe, and I wish them all the best in their efforts. It's a great lighthouse that deserves to be restored. And speaking of photos, I have a question for you, Michelle. What are your favorite lighthouses to photograph?
Oh, there's so many. Obviously, Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouse and Whaleback. I love photographing the Nubble, as well as Pemaquid Point, Marshall Point, Owl's Head. Those are all, I love photographing all of those. You can always get different views and perspectives viewing those lighthouses. So
Definitely. Have you done any night photography?
gosh, years ago, I did some at Nubble.
Mm-hmm.
I had rented a lens that I could do some, real nighttime photography with. So I did that. I was still getting, familiar with nighttime photography. So the pictures weren't that great. And it is kind of tough because there is a lot of light noise at the up at the Nubble in the Nubble area. So
That's true.
but yeah.
Yeah. Well, my experience before, like last week, was similar to yours. But last week, I took part in a 4-day photography workshop at lighthouses on the coast of Maine, including some of the ones you just mentioned, with Pete Lerro of Lerro Photography. That's Lerro. Listeners might remember that he's been on the podcast a couple of times. We also did a USLHS virtual Zoom event with him. It was an amazing experience, the workshop last week. I kind of get frustrated with myself when I don't catch on to something quickly. So like you, I didn't get that much into night photography. I would get kind of frustrated with it, and I wanted, good results quickly and that kind of thing. But now, thanks to Pete in the workshop last week, I feel much more comfortable with it. He's a great teacher. He's very patient. The fact that he was so patient with me kind of made me more patient with myself. So we photographed 3 of the most beautiful lighthouses on the coast of Maine, which you just mentioned: Pemmican Point, Marshall Point, and Owl's Head. We had a volunteer at Owl's Head who wore an old keeper's uniform and posed for us, which was pretty fun. I had a really great time. Our mutual friend Bob Trapani and his son Dominic were there as well. Pete Lerro does a lot of other kinds of photo workshops like trains, aviation, wildlife. You can check out Lerro Photography, again, Lerro photography.com to find out more. And I recommend his workshops very highly. We don't have sponsors so far for this podcast, but I think of Pete as almost like a sponsor because he's really donated a lot to the USLHS. So I try to do what I can to promote his workshops and everything. So before we sign off today, anything else you want to remind our listeners about, Michelle?
As a matter of fact, there is, Jeremy. On October 1st from 12:30 to 7 p.m., Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses is sponsoring a Whales, Lighthouses, and Photography Lollapalooza cruise from Rye Harbor, New Hampshire. It will be a combined whale watch and lighthouse cruise with the added bonus of a guest photographer who will share tips for great photos. Check out portsmouthharborlighthouse.org for all the details.
Yeah, the guest photographer will be Mike Leonard, who listeners will also remember has been on the podcast a few times. He's an excellent photographer and a good instructor. I will be narrating the lighthouse part of that cruise. Naturalists from Granite State Whale Watch will also be aboard. This will be on the motor vessel Granite State out of Rye Harbor. It's going to be a great event. And again, as you said, portsmouthharborlighthouse.org for the details. I also want to mention that I will be one of the narrators aboard a lighthouse cruise out of Bar Harbor, Maine, or Bahaba, as they say there. On September 14th, we will be seeing 14 lighthouses in one day, which is pretty amazing. Go to barharborwales.com to learn more about that one.
Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn about tours, preservation grants, the passport program, and everything the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers. And if you listen with Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us.
So before we close up shop for today, Michelle, do you have any lighthouse jokes?
I do, Jeremy.
Uh-oh.
What does the ocean say to the lighthouse?
I don't know. I give up.
Nothing. It just waves.
Big groan. Yeah. Good one.
Yeah.
So I think we should stop there as far as jokes go for now. The guest on next week's episode will be Christian Tabor, author of Be Your Own Navigator. With that, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and
keep a good light.
Out in the dark, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.